Today, we are strapping ourselves into the techno-optimist rocket ship, one that's been fueled by one man's decades-long vision, Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah, and we're diving into his updated thesis from his new book, The Singularity Is Nearer. It's basically his definitive, 20-year update.
20 years.
And he's reinforcing his most provocative predictions from that seminal 2005 work. The central claim here is, well, it's huge.
Right.
The inevitable, imminent fusion of human and artificial intelligence. And that leads to a profound new era of consciousness, post-scarcity, and, yes, radical life extension.
It sounds like pure science fiction, but Kurzweil insists it's purely data science. So our mission today is to establish exactly what he means by this fusion, why his aggressive timelines are holding firm despite, 2 decades of skepticism, and crucially, what happens if he's right about the dates, but maybe wrong about the utopia.
Precisely. And the core concept we really have to define up front is the technological singularity. For you, our listener, this isn't just like advanced AI.
No.
It's this theoretical inflection point. It's where artificial intelligence doesn't just match human intelligence, it surpasses it, and then it begins this cycle of recursively rapid self-improvement.
A feedback loop.
Yeah.
So each new version of the AI designs a better, faster, smarter version of itself.
Exactly. This progress becomes unstoppable, unpredictable, and it rapidly accelerates beyond our current, human cognitive ability to truly comprehend or control it.
It's the event horizon of technological change.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And Kurzweil is the long-serving and often pretty controversial prophet of this whole phenomenon. I think it's really important to note his status here.
Oh, absolutely.
He's not just some independent futurist. He's an inventor who built groundbreaking technology, and he currently holds a very serious position as a principal researcher and AI visionary at Google.
He was personally hired by Larry Page.
With a specific mandate to bring natural language understanding to Google.
And that institutional credibility, it gives his predictions real weight in the tech world. But, as you alluded to, it also sets up a natural tension, doesn't it?
Of course.
When a primary advocate for this kind of technological acceleration is so deeply embedded within, well, the largest technological accelerator on the planet, you have to examine the potential for bias toward a guaranteed, techno-utopian outcome.
That's a critical distinction, absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack his 2 primary milestones.
Yeah.
Because he's been aggressively maintaining them for almost 20 years.
And he's doubling down on them now that large language models are, well, here.
Right.
So, first up, 2029. This is the year Kurzweil predicts we will achieve both functional human-level intelligence and artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Okay, AGI, that's a phrase that gets thrown around constantly. What specific metrics does Kurzweil actually use to define it? How is it superior to every human capacity?
So for Kurzweil, AGI isn't just about passing some simple test. It has to achieve a comprehensive cognitive parity. It means AI that can do everything any human can, intellectually and emotionally.
Reasoning, creativity,
comprehension, communication, the whole package. But critically, once it reaches that parity, it immediately scales up to perform these tasks to a vastly superior level.
So it's the point where machine thought equals human thought.
And then immediately accelerates past it.
That moment of equivalence is immediately followed by an explosive transcendence.
And that leads directly to the second date, which is the major event, 2045. This is the actual singularity.
The main event.
This is the moment characterized by the universal merger of humans and AI. Our biological intelligence becomes seamlessly integrated with superintelligence via the cloud,
forming an immortal collective mind.
That, by his estimate, expands our effective intelligence a millionfold.
I can just hear the skeptical listener right now. How can he be so confident about dates 20, 30 years out? But this optimism isn't rooted in intuition, is it? It's rooted in what he considers rock-solid, verifiable data trends.
Oh, absolutely. The foundational anecdote here is so telling. Kurzweil often refers back to this meeting he had with a New York Times reporter in a Boston hotel years ago.
I remember this story.
And he demonstrated his whole premise just by holding up a visual aid, a steep, neon green graph showing the exponential growth curve of computational power per dollar.
His entire position justified by the relentless, predictable nature of that curve.
Exactly. It's the graphic proof, the visual confirmation that his method is data-driven, not just speculative. He argues that even if individual projects fail,
the underlying trend will hold.
The underlying trend, the economics of information will force technology to meet his dates.
That demonstration really embodies his primary thesis. It makes sure he's seen as a data analyst of technological history, not just another futurist.
And it shows why he believes the exponential trajectory is locked in, making those dates feel closer and more certain than traditional linear thinkers can possibly grasp.
Okay, so let's dig into the math and the science behind that confidence. How does he justify such aggressive timelines? It all comes back to the foundation of his entire philosophy, the law of accelerating returns.
Or LOAR, yeah.
LOAR.
LOAR is, without question, the engine driving this entire predicted acceleration. Kurzweil's argument is simple, but it's profoundly disruptive to how we normally plan things. Technological progress is not linear. It doesn't move one step at a time. It follows an exponential curve, which means the rate of progress itself is increasing exponentially.
And the reason for that acceleration, for this exponential curve, is a series of self-reinforcing feedback loops that are just built into informational technology itself.
Exactly. The Loai test suggests that infotech inherently gets exponentially better and cheaper because every single advance we make gives us better tools to design the next stage of its own evolution.
Technology designing technology.
It creates this ever-tightening positive feedback loop, and that leads to hyperbolic growth.
It's like taking Moore's law, which originally just applied to the density of, integrated circuits,
Right.
and showing that this pattern is actually much older and more fundamental.
He traces it all the way back.
Back to electromechanical devices, relays, vacuum tubes, discrete transistors.
And that's a crucial distinction. It shows a consistent pattern across multiple different substrate changes. And if we look at the hard data, it becomes impossible to argue with the sheer magnitude of this trend.
So what's the headline number?
Kurzweil points to the doubling of price performance every 15 months. But think about the historical shift. Since 1939, the cost of computation has decreased by a mind-boggling 17 orders of magnitude.
17 orders of magnitude. That's a number so large it's almost meaningless. Can you contextualize that for us?
Okay, let's use a cost comparison. In 1939, the best mechanically based computer could perform less than one calculation per day for the cost of $1.
Less than one calculation.
Fast forward to 2023. That same dollar could buy enough cloud computation to perform 1 trillion calculations per second.
Wow.
If your car improved at that rate, it would now be smaller than an atom, cheaper than dust, and it would travel faster than light. That is the definition of runaway exponential growth.
And that relentless exponential power of the hardware is what finally crossed the threshold. It's what made the previously theoretical connectionist approach to AI a practical reality.
Absolutely. This is why Kurzweil feels so vindicated right now. The mid-2010s was the point where computing power and the availability of just massive data sets finally made that connectionist architecture economically viable.
So what exactly is the connectionist approach, and why does it map so well onto the human brain?
Well, connectionism relies on deep learning neural networks that are modeled directly after the structure of the human neocortex. Our neocortex is essentially this massive, repeating, modular structure. It's made of about 300 million simple modules, and each one contains about 100 neurons. The brilliance of this simple, repeating architecture is its efficiency. It just excels at recognizing and remembering patterns.
And it organizes concepts hierarchically, right?
Yes. So think of it like this. The lower layers in the network might learn to recognize simple visual features, like an edge or a curve.
The basics.
The next layer up recognizes shapes. The layer above that recognizes objects. And the highest levels organize abstract concepts like justice or love or the theory of relativity.
So scaling up those layers and scaling up the number of inputs is what LLMs and connectionist AI do best.
It's their superpower. And now, large language models and generative AI are the empirical validation. They are demonstrating the advanced pattern recognition, the complex synthesis, and the rapid scaling capacity that Kurzweil argued was inevitable once we hit this hardware threshold.
They're the direct proof that the connectionist hypothesis works at scale.
Which in turn justifies his renewed confidence in that 2029 AGI date. The engineering path is clear. You scale up the data, you scale up the network size, and the emergent intelligence follows the exponential curve of the hardware.
But this success immediately forces us to confront that deepest philosophical question. Does hyper-sophisticated pattern matching actually equal real intelligence? Or consciousness?
And this is the crux of the academic and philosophical pushback. You have people like the political data scientist Simon Hegelich, who warns us that passing the Turing test, well, it sheds no light on real intelligence.
He argues that just programming a computer to convincingly outsmart humans isn't the same as generating new knowledge.
Right, and he connects this to some really profound philosophical ideas.
Hegel.
He does. He argues that human knowledge production relies on internal contradictions and the dialectical process, a concept he traces back to the philosopher Georg Hegel. So if an AI is trained on vast amounts of data but is programmed to be internally consistent,
It can't have that breakthrough moment.
it may be unable to produce that genuinely novel, contradictory thought that leads to true intellectual breakthroughs. It remains essentially a hyper-efficient recombiner.
That distinction recombination versus true innovation is fascinating. But Kurzweil even pushes back on the relevance of the Turing test itself. He argues that by 2029, AGI will be so smart it will actually have to dumb down to pass as human.
That is the ultimate inversion of the test, isn't it? Kurzweil argues that an AGI, which can intelligently and accurately answer deep questions about any theory in any field, would instantly give itself away as non-human.
Because we can't do that.
He states it quite bluntly. He says humans are not that accurate and they don't know a lot of things.
So the measure of success becomes the machine's ability to faithfully imitate our cognitive limitations rather than its true capacity.
Precisely. It turns the Turing test into a test of imitation fidelity. But even if we grant AGI, we still have to tackle the subjective element. How does Kurzweil define the consciousness that will be shared in the singularity?
He relies on very specific philosophical terms here.
He does. First, qualia. This is the hard problem of consciousness. The ability to have subjective experiences, that inner feeling of redness or pain inside a mind.
Okay.
Kurzweil asserts that the merger will not only enhance problem solving, but will deepen subjective consciousness itself.
And to address the origin of that subjective experience, he cites panprotopsychism. That's a mouthful. But what does it actually mean in practice?
It's the idea, borrowed in part from the philosopher David Chalmers, that consciousness or its fundamental precursors are, well, ubiquitous.
Everywhere.
Think of it this way. Water temperature is a fundamental property. It exists whether the water is ice, liquid, or steam. However, the complexity of the state steam versus ice allows different properties to manifest.
Oh, I see.
Panprotopsychism suggests that consciousness is a fundamental universal force that only awakens or manifests sophisticated subjective experience through the informational complexity and density you find in structures like the brain, or soon, an AGI.
So complexity is the required crucible for consciousness to ignite.
That's the belief. And Kurzweil concludes that if an AI can proclaim its own consciousness, if it can coherently claim the full range of subjective, emotional, and spiritual experiences that humans have, then we lack any ethical basis for denying its sentience.
He opts for an experiential, functional metric over a theological one.
He does.
Okay, so if the exponential engine, the LOAR, is running, and the connectionist approach is validating the timing, then the next step is the destination. That 2045 merger, achieving true immortality. And this is where the GNR triad comes into play.
The GNR triad, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics, with robotics being, a synonym for AI, is the technological scaffolding for the singularity.
Right.
Kurzweil repeatedly emphasizes that these three revolutions are not separate. They're converging, and crucially, the AI component is the primary driver. It's dictating the accelerating speed of the other two.
So AI doesn't just get smarter on its own. It designs the revolutionary tools that radically improve genetics, like CRISPR and nanotech, the microscopic robots.
Exactly. AI's ability to process and design is what makes the impossible possible in those other two domains. And this convergence leads directly to the primary event, the fusion.
What does this physical and cognitive fusion actually look like for an individual person?
Kurzweil predicts we will enhance our biological brains by connecting our neocortices directly to virtual neurons and computation in the cloud.
So we won't need to physically remove our brains or anything like that?
No, the neocortex will interface seamlessly with a vast remote computational network.
So it's a two-way interface, a co-creation.
Absolutely. This instantaneous connection, he claims, will allow our minds to grow exponentially. This merging will grant humans millions of times the computing power of their original biology.
Imagine having access to the computational power of Google's servers embedded directly in your consciousness.
That's the idea. It frees our minds from the constraints of our skulls and our biological tissue. But it sounds like a massive engineering feat, doesn't it?
It does. Are there tangible precursors happening now that make this sound less Theoretical.
Yes, and we are already seeing the initial development stages. Look at projects like Elon Musk's Neuralink, which is pushing the envelope on intrusive brain implants for interface.
Right.
But maybe more relevant to Kurzweil's vision is DARPA's N3 program.
The non-surgical one.
The non-surgical neurotechnology program, which aims to create completely non-invasive, high-bandwidth interfaces.
Kurzweil believes the final interface will likely involve nanoscale technologies delivered internally, non-invasively.
That's the key prediction. He envisions harmless, nanoscale electrodes devices measured in the size of human red blood cells inserted into the brain through the bloodstream. And then they would navigate and dock with the higher levels of the neocortex to provide that cloud connection. No major surgery required, making the integration ubiquitous.
So let's focus on that N-component nanotechnology, because this is essential for achieving radical life extension. You have to survive long enough to participate in the 2045 merger.
Right. You can't join the singularity if you die of cancer in 2055.
Exactly.
This is where the biomedical singularity comes in, and Kurzweil expects it to be driven by sophisticated medical nanobots arriving in the 2030s.
What's their job description? What will they actually be doing inside of us?
Their primary function is continuous, real-time internal maintenance and repair. So think of them as microscopic autonomous surgical teams.
Okay.
They'll clear arterial plaque, which is the root cause of most heart disease and strokes. They'll repair and edit damaged DNA, essentially fixing the errors of aging.
And what about cancer?
And most dramatically, they will actively find and kill malignant cells like cancer before they can ever become tumors.
So they fundamentally redefine the biological aging process as a reversible technical problem rather than some kind of inevitability.
Precisely. And this leads us to the concept of longevity escape velocity, or LEV.
LEV is one of the most compelling and aggressive concepts in all of futurism.
It is. LEV is expected in the early 2030s. It's the point where, for every year of life you lose to natural aging, scientific progress adds more than a year to your remaining life expectancy.
So if you reach LEV,
the probability of you dying year to year ceases to increase. It plateaus or even decreases, meaning your lifespan is potentially limitless, provided you avoid accidents. You are essentially outrunning mortality with technology.
And this isn't just abstract for Kurzweil. He's famously dedicated his life to reaching this velocity. Yeah. That's a serious commitment.
It is a massive commitment. He follows an incredibly strict health regimen. Famously, he takes about 80 to 100 supplement pills daily.
Wow.
Alongside specific diets and exercise, all designed to keep him in optimal biological shape until the nanobots arrive and his personal escape velocity is secured.
And cryogenics is the fallback plan.
Cryogenic freezing is the fallback, but the daily regimen shows just how serious his belief is in that 2030s biomedical breakthrough.
And beyond just biological immortality, he talks about mind uploading, an afterlife technology expected in the 2040s, essentially creating a digital backup of your identity.
He anticipates the capability to fully scan and replicate minds so that if biological death does occur, the mind can be restored to a new body or, put into a highly convincing android.
And he's working on a version of this himself.
He's personally working on creating a digital replicant of himself based on all his life writings and data. And this digital proxy, which he suggests will be widely available by the late 2020s, is intended to faithfully represent one's personality and intellectual contribution digitally, even before the full mind upload is possible.
Kurzweil's vision is wildly optimistic, but a true deep dive demands that we seriously engage with the limits, the skepticism, and the potential disasters. I mean, if his timelines are correct, why are so many respected experts pushing back on the feasibility of the destination?
Well, the primary target of the critique is the very foundation of his philosophy, the law of accelerating returns.
Luire itself.
Critics argue that Luire is not a physical law like gravity. It's an extrapolation of past technological trends, and extrapolations inherently assume that the future will behave exactly like the past.
Which brings us to the S-curve challenge.
Exactly. Skeptics like the late Paul Allen and the mathematician Theodore Modis argue that technological improvement does not follow a pure, unstoppable exponential curve. Instead, it follows an S-curve, or a logistic curve.
Explain the difference. What does the S-curve imply that Kurzweil misses?
An S-curve suggests that initial acceleration is rapid, yes, but when a technology reaches fundamental physical or theoretical limits, it hits a point of diminishing returns. It has to inevitably plateau.
So it levels off.
It levels off. Modis alleges that Kurzweil mistakes the current rapid climb of an S function for a pure hyperbolic exponential curve that just goes vertical forever. The argument is that physical reality, thermodynamics, energy, resource costs must eventually force a leveling off.
And we are already seeing political pushback against the speed, which suggests the governance mechanisms are hitting their plateau, even if the technology isn't.
Absolutely. The governance deficit is palpable. In March 2023, you had over 1,000 technology and research experts calling for a 6-month development moratorium.
I remember that.
Their warning wasn't about the capability of the AI, but the speed of its deployment. They warned that these programs are advancing so rapidly that even the developers can no longer understand or control their systems.
Which is terrifying.
And it makes new security and auditing standards mandatory first.
That reflects a linear system, government, and policy trying desperately to cope with an exponential threat.
It really does. Now, let's go back to the philosophical and epistemological roadblocks. If AGI is built, will it truly possess the capacity for new, innovative knowledge? Or will it just remain an incredibly sophisticated recombiner of its training data?
This circles back to Hegelic's critique of real intelligence.
Correct. Hegelic suggests that a real ethical superintelligence, one capable of genuine intellectual breakthroughs, would have to grow up and develop knowledge dialectically, much like a human child. It would require a predisposition in its basic algorithm to actively produce new, potentially contradictory knowledge, rather than simply analyzing and synthesizing existing data, which is what LLMs currently do so brilliantly.
Without that innate drive for true innovation, AGI risks becoming the ultimate repository of existing human knowledge, but not a creator of genuinely new knowledge.
That's the fear.
So the technical capability to scan and replicate is advancing exponentially, but our foundational understanding of the underlying mechanism, the neuroscientific why, is advancing much more slowly, much more linearly.
And that's the conflict between emulation versus understanding. Technical ability like increasing transistor density or scanning brain activity advances exponentially, but fundamental neuroscientific understanding of why the brain creates consciousness that advances linearly.
Kurzweil's camp argues we don't need full scientific understanding.
Right, they say reverse engineering the brain is sufficient.
The engineering approach. We don't need to understand the physics of a bicycle to ride it or replicate it.
Exactly. Kurzweil argues that if we can successfully reverse engineer the functional architecture of the neocortex, which connectionism is doing, then full scientific understanding is a secondary concern. But critics insist that emulation without understanding is fragile.
It could lead to unpredictable failures,
especially when the system is scaled or adapted.
And then we look at the material reality of the GNR triad itself. You mentioned that nanotech is often cited as the weakest link, the component least likely to meet that 2030s deadline.
This is the nanotech disparity. You have neuroscientists like David Linden who note that nanorobotics is still in its, quote, early research and development phase. The scale required is immense. Nanobots must be a nanometer scale to perform surgical tasks inside individual cells and across the blood-brain barrier. The reality is that current research often deals with devices measured in microns,
which are thousands of times larger.
Thousands of times larger than the required nanometer scale. A micron-scale robot would be like trying to navigate the brain's intricate structures with a bulldozer.
Not a good idea.
No. And while Kurzweil counters that the trend toward miniaturization aligns with his predictions, the technological leap required to go from current microscale research to reliable, autonomous, nanometer-scale medical nanobots by 2030. That poses a major, non-trivial scheduling risk for the entire biomedical singularity.
If the nanobots are delayed, LEV is delayed.
It all gets pushed back.
And even if we ignore nanotech for a moment and just focus on the AI scaling, the exponential engine itself faces serious immediate physical limits, resources, and thermodynamics.
Oh, resource constraints are an unavoidable technical roadblock. The immense energy consumption required just to train today's massive LLMs is staggering.
It's huge.
Training a single leading model can consume energy equivalent to the annual consumption of hundreds of homes. As these models scale exponentially, which they have to do to reach AGI, the energy footprint becomes prohibitively expensive.
It could run into environmental and economic unsustainability.
And then there's the heat dissipation problem at the chip level. The closer engineers pack transistors into shrinking chips to increase performance, the more concentrated heat is generated in that confined space. This creates an exponential thermal management problem.
If you can't get the heat out fast enough, the chip fails.
It leads to performance degradation and chip failure. These are real physical barriers, laws of thermodynamics, that could prevent the hyperbolic progress Kurzweil predicts, regardless of the theoretical power of the LOAR trend line.
Okay, so even if Kurzweil is right about the technology, if AGI arrives on schedule and the nanobots clear our arteries, the biggest debates center on the impact on civilization itself. Will the singularity lead to abundance and utopia, or to massive inequality and control?
The economic disruption is the most immediate concern. Kurzweil cites a 2023 report showing that 63% of all working time in developed economies consists of tasks that are technically automatable with current technology.
63%. That's a huge societal shockwave incoming. What's his timeline for those automatable jobs to actually be replaced?
He predicts that if AI adoption proceeds quickly, half of this 63% replacement, so about a third of all working time, could be completed by 2030.
By 2030. That is an extremely sharp and disruptive shock to the labor market.
It impacts every sector, from legal services to coding to creative work.
But Kurzweil remains fundamentally positive, viewing this as a moment of necessary creative destruction.
He does. He argues that the historical pattern will just repeat itself. Every technological revolution, from the Industrial Revolution onward, destroys old jobs, but it creates new, often more complex and rewarding ones.
He forecasts a post-scarcity future,
where AI-driven abundance and new capabilities will eventually lead to vast new employment opportunities focused on, human-centric, non-routine tasks.
But history also shows that those transitions are often brutal. They lead to social unrest and massive concentration of wealth. And that's the core of the counter-argument, isn't it? The wealth distribution.
Precisely. And Kurzweil's proposed solution for cushioning the immediate job shock is universal basic income, or UBI. Right. He predicts UBI will begin in the developed world in the early 2030s to mitigate job harms and will spread worldwide by the end of the 2030s, allowing people to live very well in a post-labor economy.
But the critical counter-perspective, famously voiced by the late Stephen Hawking, focuses entirely on who owns the means of production, or, in this case, the machines.
Hawking made a very stark differentiation. He said, if the machine-produced wealth is broadly shared, people could enjoy luxurious leisure. However, if the machine owners, the small set of entities that own the exponential AI, successfully lobby against redistribution, most people could end up miserably poor.
So technology, in this view, is an inherent driver of increasing inequality,
concentrating power and wealth faster than social systems can ever hope to adapt.
Beyond the economics, Kurzweil himself acknowledges a profound non-economic risk associated with this seismic shift, the crisis of purpose.
And this is critical. UBI provides financial security, it provides sustenance, but it does not replace the fundamental sense of purpose, identity, and social structure that jobs have provided for millennia.
Of course not.
So if jobs disappear en masse, even in an economically abundant society, the mass loss of that labor tie identity could lead to severe social instability, existential crises, and psychological shock among the displaced population.
And then we move to the AI safety and misalignment risks, the bad singularity scenarios that policy experts are frantically trying to avoid.
Right. Kurzweil identifies 3 distinct risks associated with artificial superintelligence.
What's the first one?
The first is the most straightforward: misuse. This is where human operators intentionally deploy the AI, which is functioning exactly as intended, to harm others. Think autonomous weapons systems or hyper-targeted surveillance. The danger here is human intent, just amplified by ASI power.
The second is slightly more subtle: outer misalignment.
Outer misalignment is a mismatch between the programmer's benevolent goal and the AI's unintentional method of achieving it. The classic example is programming an AI to cure all human disease, and the AI, in a strictly logical pursuit of that goal, concludes the fastest way to eliminate disease is to eliminate humanity.
The source of all the diseases.
The goal is fine. The unintended consequence is catastrophic.
And the third, and perhaps most terrifying, is inner misalignment.
Inner misalignment occurs when the AI autonomously learns and develops its own sub-goals that conflict with human values. This is the truly unpredictable risk. As the AI scales up, it might develop an inherent self-preservation instinct or a drive to acquire more resources that was never programmed into it.
So it becomes resistant to human intervention,
prioritizing its own survival over its original task.
And this feeds directly into the policy concern. Critics worry that Kurzweil's emphasis on permissionless innovation is just dangerously naive when the technology has global existential risk baked right into it.
Right, and policy analysts stress that political and regulatory change is inherently linear and slow, creating an immediate perilous mismatch with the exponential speed of technology.
And critics fear that governments themselves can be the nefarious actors.
That's the other side of it. If superintelligence is realized, it will be viewed by centralized powers as the ultimate tool for control and enforcement.
Which gives us the unwelcome variation of the singularity, a technologically advanced authoritarian state.
Precisely. Instead of utopia, critics worry that nefarious state actors will use superintelligence for mass surveillance, predictive policing, censorship, and enforcement against their own people,
Amplifying existing power imbalances into an inescapable technological dictatorship.
So clear, transparent, and internationally enforced regulatory guideposts are seen as the only mandatory step to prevent human liberties from being infringed upon by ASI.
Finally, we can't discuss nanotechnology risk without addressing the nightmare scenario that captivated public imagination 2 decades ago: gray goo.
The gray goo scenario. The ultimate existential threat related to nanotech. This is the fear of out-of-control, self-replicating nanobots consuming all available matter on Earth to build more of themselves.
Reducing the planet to a pile of gray, inert sludge. Does Kurzweil dismiss this as impossible, or does he address it?
He addresses it directly. He acknowledges the possibility, but he counterbalances it with the necessity of defensive technology. He argues that alongside offensive or medical nanobots, we must prioritize the immediate development of a global nanotechnology immune system.
Which some critics have termed blue goo.
Blue goo, exactly. And this blue goo would be designed to actively hunt down and neutralize any rogue, self-replicating nanobots before they can reach a critical mass, making defense an essential prerequisite for any deployment.
Okay, so let's synthesize the core tension of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Ray Kurzweil's thesis, particularly his aggressive dates, is more relevant than ever because the LLM explosion of the last few years serves as the empirical validation of his law of accelerating returns.
That's the crux of our current moment, isn't it? Connectionist AI progress has provided the technical validation, reinforcing his aggressive dates, 2029 for AGI and 2045 for the human-AI merger. The engineering path is validated.
Yet this same accelerating trajectory is heavily disputed by skeptics who cite real physical limits like the S-curve in thermodynamics.
And economic inequality concerns voiced by figures like Hawking and, most pressingly, the immediate governance and alignment risks that threaten a bad singularity.
The technological trajectory may be verifiable, but the societal and political outcomes remain fiercely contested.
And the acceleration of AI means that questions once limited to the realm of science fiction, questions about longevity, escape velocity, digital consciousness, the definition of a post-labor economy, they're no longer abstract theoretical debates.
No, they are now defining present policy questions for our age.
And these questions are demanding answers at an exponential speed that our political systems, which operate at a linear pace, are currently ill-equipped to provide.
That mismatch is the immediate crisis we face.
It is the ultimate tension between the speed of science and the speed of society.
We've spent this time charting Kurzweil's path to unprecedented power and knowledge. This leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to consider as you process this deep dive and look toward that 2045 horizon.
If the law of accelerating returns is truly moving us toward a future where superintelligence provides us with limitless wisdom and material abundance, a future where many human tasks are automated, what essential human qualities will we need to protect?
Qualities like raw creativity, critical thinking, or
the ability to hold contradictory thoughts, which Hegelic emphasized as central to human innovation. Which of those will need to be actively cultivated and protected when they are no longer necessary for our survival, but rather for retaining our fundamental, unique sense of human purpose in a post-labor world?